friends, how are you? Welcome to Changing Tracks. Today we have with us Jiza Zito all the way from the United States. Jiza, how are you? You're very welcome to our program today.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Christina.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, your childhood, your faith?
Yes, so my name is Jiza, and I am a wife, married to my husband Mark for about 10 years. We have 4 kids here on earth and 2 in heaven. And I am a wedding and portrait photographer, as well as the co-founder and creative director of a Catholic blog for brides and newlyweds called Spoken Bride. And we are currently residing in Jacksonville, Florida, in the United States.
Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood? Were you raised in a Catholic family? Did you have faith?
Yeah, so my parents immigrated here from the Philippines to New York City. So I was born in New York, and my grandma helped raise me for the first few years. And then we moved to New Jersey, where my brother was born. And we went to Mass regularly, and I went to a Catholic school, and it was about the age 3 of my brother when he was diagnosed with a severe case of autism. And at the time, they didn't really know anything about autism, so it really shook our family, and we didn't know what to make of it. So almost out of desperation, we prayed for a lot of healing, because again, we didn't really know anything about autism at the time, and we were going to Mass and going to healing masses and healing services, and we were praying the rosary daily for his healing. And when nothing happened, all of a sudden, we stopped going to church.
Did that make you reject God? I mean, how did that affect you personally in your relationship with God?
I was really young, so I didn't really understand what was happening. It wasn't really until as I got older into my teen years that it got difficult, because our house became isolating, and it was cold, it was dark. My parents really retreated into themselves, and so I retreated to myself as well, and alone with a lot of my thoughts. And they were just very consumed with my brother's condition, and just everybody felt alone and was just coping in their own way. And for me, in my teen years, that's when I really started to encounter depression and suicidal ideations. I would write poetry that was extremely dark and just questioning the meaning of life and why I was here, what was the point of existence. And it was just a really dark and lonely time being a teenager in my house.
What was high school like for you?
High school was like a big facade for me. So I was captain of the cheerleading squad, captain of the soccer team, I was class vice president. I did the whole 9 yards of putting on this front that everything was perfect and that my life was perfect. Trying to win the affections of other people around me, whether it be my classmates and the students and the teachers, and then at the same time also trying to win the affections of my parents at home. But in reality, I would go home after school, and it would just be a return to that darkness and that profound loneliness and that isolation and what eventually would be suicidal thoughts. And I wrote a lot of dark poetry, just wondering what was the meaning of life and what was the purpose of my existence, and just confused as to why I was on earth and what was the point of it. But as high school progressed, my parents realized that I was a year late for confirmation. So confirmation, where I grew up, started in your second year of high school, and I was coming into my 3rd year of high school. And so it was through confirmation that my parents, even though they were still falling away from the faith, they would bring me to Mass, drop me off, and they would leave, and they would come back and pick me up. And I started to attend CCD through there and got reacquainted with like church teachings and things of the faith. And all of a sudden, one day, I looked at the schedule, and instead of having CCD that week on a Monday, it was on a Wednesday. And I'm absolutely certain that the schedule said Wednesday. And I rushed out after cheerleading practice, went into the building where I thought was CCD, and instead I found the youth minister. And I told him, I'm here for CCD, where's CCD? And he's like, no, CCD is on Mondays. And I was like, no, the schedule said Wednesday. I read the schedule, it said Wednesday. And he was like, no, we don't have CCD today, but you're more than welcome to stay for youth group. And my Protestant friends had always talked about youth group, and so I was kind of curious about it. And so I stayed, but then I started going back every week. And every week there was just something that would just speak to my heart. Even though I didn't really know what it would just speak to me, and I was just drawn to it, and I came back every week.
So it wasn't like you had a personal relationship with God, but you did feel drawn to what they were talking about.
Yes, absolutely. There was, just through the talks and through the music, there was just something that was just drawing me back, and I just didn't know what it was.
Then how did your personal relationship with God come about?
So that spring of my third year of high school, they were having a retreat. It was called Youth 2000. And I was attending mainly because everybody else was going. And it was through there and through the talks that they, again, there was that draw from my heart of there's something here, I don't know what it is. And one of the talks on the last night was talking about sin and how much our sin hurts the Lord and hurts ourselves and hurts the other people around us. And I was just in absolute tears. I was absolutely heartbroken, just realizing how much my sin of self-pity and the suicidal thoughts and of anger, really. I had a lot of anger and a lot of fear, just how much that hurt everybody around me and hurt God. And the speaker was like, oh, well, we have hope because we have the sacrament of confession. And this was in a gym, and to the side there was a stage, and there was about 3 priests that were sitting there, and there was a line. And again, there was that draw from my heart to go. Even though I didn't really know what it was at the time, even though I was having remorse over my sins, I still couldn't put my finger as to what that draw was. I stood in line for confession, and then absolutely in tears, come into the confessional, told the priest that it had been years since I had gone, maybe about that time since I had my first Holy Communion when it was required. And in the confessional, he said that for my penance, that he wanted me to go out and back into adoration and ask God why he brought me there. And so after the confessional, still feeling remorseful, there was a weight that was off, but there was still that lingering of like, well, I still have this missing piece, this missing hole in my heart. I don't know what it is. And at this point, the talk was done. They were starting praise and worship. They had dimmed down the lights, and they were starting adoration. And they had built this sort of wooden pyramid and had a bunch of candles all around it. And at the very top was the monstrance in Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. And again, this is the first time I've ever experienced adoration. So I sat down there. I said, okay, God, why did you bring me here? And it was in that moment that it was like his love and mercy just pierced into my heart and just shattered all the darkness. And just this great recognition and this consolation in knowing that he had been in my life this entire time, and that I wasn't there by accident, that the youth group thing wasn't by accident, and that my life wasn't by accident, and that I wasn't by myself in darkness this entire time, but that he was there. And that was it. Like my what was tears of sadness was now tears of joy, and this absolute fire for the Lord and just wanting to be with him. And that was it.
So then, how did you get from total darkness to light? I mean, did you fall back into sin again? Was it like difficult for you to dedicate your life to the Lord?
So as I started to get deeper into my prayer life and the relationship with the Lord, naturally the desire for the religious life was on the forefront of my mind, because I would see religious sisters and think, oh, I just see them living for the Lord, and I desire that, I want that. And for me, that was the way to holiness. But deep down inside, I knew there was always a call to the married life. But at one point, a priest had advised me, like, this is a season of your life that you can give to the Lord, so really discern that call. And I did, and it was through there that I had gotten involved with a religious group. That there was a lot of focus on the devil and a bit of a disorderly view on the spiritual life. And so I started to become very over-scrupulous, just unable to see the mercy of God and unable to discern his will properly, because now I was in fear of what the devil was doing and how he could be possibly distracting me from doing God's will. And it was through there that I started to sink back into that depression and to sink into suicidal thoughts and what eventually became despair. Because as my supposed entrance dates for religious life started to approach, God was starting to close the doors, which I was at peace with, but at the same time, I didn't know what I was supposed to do on the other side. And I got into an unhealthy dating relationship soon after that. Everything at home with my parents was still the same. And it wasn't long that once that relationship had ended, that all I could think about was like, oh, the devil, the devil, the devil. And desperation hit, and I tried to commit suicide twice. But again, this is where like the mercy of God is just so much bigger than us and so immense. And because even despite those moments where I was contemplating on taking my life, God sent people to intervene during those points so that it didn't happen. And for that, I am forever grateful. And it was from there, I had a priest who was my confessor, call me during one of the attempts. And then I had a deacon and his wife take me into his home. And they were always bringing the Blessed Sacrament to the infirm and the homebound. And so I was always constantly around the Blessed Sacrament as well, which was also very healing. And then after I stayed with them, I still wasn't ready to go home, because at this point I was still living close to my parents, but I was living on my own. But again, I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts, because I knew that those thoughts would lead me to possible temptation of despair. So from the deacon and his wife's home, I went to another friend's home, and she is married, and she had 4 kids at the time, and she was homeschooling, and she brought her kids religiously every day to daily mass, and they would pray the family rosary every day faithfully at night. And we would just stay up really late and have these edifying conversations. So again, mercy of God just completely brought a lot of healing staying at her home. And right after that, I went on a pilgrimage. So it was like boom, boom, boom. I had all these events in my life that God was really using to bring healing in such a rapid and an immense way that was completely undeniable. And forever, I am forever grateful for his mercy in that.
Where did you go on pilgrimage, and what happened there?
So I went on a pilgrimage called the Bike for Life pilgrimage. And it was a bit of a unique pilgrimage because it was here in the States, and it started in one state, and we were riding our bicycles with pro-life t-shirts to the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C., and we're starting in North Carolina. And I didn't know what God was doing when he was calling me into this pilgrimage, and I was just open to, I wanted to just be open to his voice and his healing, because at this point it was very prevalent that he was moving in such an immense way in my life. And there was a lot of peace and a lot of quiet moments with the Lord, and a lot of rectifying a lot of the false teachings that I had in my mind about myself and my life and his love. And then the pilgrimage ended in Washington, D.C. on the feast of Our Lady's Assumption. And as we were getting ready to depart, there was this newly ordained priest, and he was a Franciscan Friar of the Renewal. And he approached me just nonchalantly and asked me, "Hey, can I pray for you? How can I pray for you?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I thought I was called to the religious life, but then I got into a dating relationship and it didn't work out. And I just need prayers on my life and what God wants me to do." Really just downplaying everything that I had been through as far as depression and everything else. And he was like, "Okay, I'll pray for you for that." And he paused and he looked at me. He goes, "Just put everything into the hands of Our Lady. If you put everything into her hands of the Lady, she's just going to open doors." And he paused again. He said, "I think you're going to find out what that is very soon." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I knew in that moment he had just said something very profound. I'm like, I have no idea what God is doing, but okay, I'm going to be open. I'm going to put everything into the hands of Our Lady. And it wasn't long after that I met a man who is now my husband, and we got engaged. And then at the March for Life, I saw this priest that had told me to put everything into the hands of Our Lady. And so I ran up to him, millions of people at this March for Life, marching for the unborn. And I saw him and I ran to him and I said, "Hey," and he goes, "Oh, hi." And I was like, "You know how you told me to put everything into the hands of Our Lady?" And he's like, "Yeah, how's that going for you?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm engaged." And I showed him my engagement ring. And he was like, "Oh, that's so exciting. Praise the Lord. When is the date?" And at that point, we had just literally set the date just on a spare of a moment because of my husband's work schedule, and he was going to be out of town. And so I was like, "Oh yeah, it's going to be on August 15th. And he goes, "Oh, that's a year since I told you to put everything into the hands of Our Lady." And in that moment, both he and I just started crying. It was an affirmation of God working through my life and Our Lady's hand through it, as well as an affirmation of his vocation to the priesthood. And so it was just beautiful and very consoling to realize just how much Our Lady really played a part in my life.
That's beautiful. So you saw the hand of the Lord in the people around you who were trying to help you and support you. What would you say was the key to getting out of that darkness?
As I was already out of school, and so I was working, and I was able to provide for myself. And so it was through that I started, after that turning point, after my suicide, that I sought out Christian therapy regularly. For many, many years, I went to therapy, and I was also receiving the sacraments regularly and going to my confessor regularly, who was very diligent in working with me as far as he would say, tell me all the lies that you believe, and we will shed God's light on it, so now we know the truth, and the truth will be in your heart. And so it took a lot of work to just undo all the lies that I had believed as far as like the devil having control over my life, and now just seeing like God's immense mercy and his love, and the truth of like what that love and mercy is. And which I'm also just a big believer of just having a priest as your spiritual director, because they can do things that a lay person can't, and that is to administer the sacraments and to go to confession, and most importantly to speak in persona Christi. Because it was after those 2 suicide attempts that because now I'm at the point I had to confess these, and he said, do not attempt again or you will be successful. And there was just something about that when he said it with in persona Christi, that like whatever oppression I had, like my soul like hearkened to it and just awoke. And there's still those temptations, but there was no more power over me. So between regularly going to the sacraments and getting the spiritual direction, as well as seeking a good Christian therapist faithfully for years, and then at the same time, like getting to know myself and knowing my triggers and having to really ask for the Lord to give me that perseverance and that fortitude to seek out treatment if I needed it in that moment and not hesitate. Those have all worked together to get me to a more healthy space mentally and spiritually.
You talk to this priest, he says that you're in Our Lady's hands, you meet Mark, and you end up getting engaged the next year. So does Mark have anything to do with getting out of that darkness, or was something else going on at that time?
Yes, I would say that my husband Mark definitely played a bit of a role in my healing, because by the time we had met, again, I was getting seeking regular spiritual direction and seeking counseling and therapy regularly. And as we were getting to know each other, I had shared with him after the first date that, hey, this is everything that I struggle with. This is my life, and how do you feel about that? And I told him the whole story, and he patiently listened, and he said, okay. Like, that doesn't change anything that I think of you or how I feel about you. And I was like, okay. And so we continued our courtship, and then I accepted a job at the Theology Body Institute, which through the organization, they offer they regularly offer courses on John Paul II's teaching on the theology of the body. And being fully immersed in that, I found so much healing and redemption, because again, John Paul II's words on just the meaning of life and the meaning of your body and the meaning of creation all started to make sense to me, as far as like, why am I here, and what is the purpose? What is our purpose here on earth? So it was through the Theology Body Institute, and then just the patience and understanding of Mark and my healing, those two situations, that him and my internship also brought a lot of healing in my life.
You get married, you form a family. What role does God play in your life? You mentioned before that you have a blog for newlyweds. How did that come about, and what do you do?
So I find that our marriage is very eventful, because he's in the Navy, so we move around constantly. So I kind of joke around with the Lord a lot that like, at one point I wanted to be a missionary. So here we are, traveling a lot and meeting lots of people, and just serving the Lord wherever we go, and while raising our family together. And I've always enjoyed photography, and I was photographing the children. And as I would photograph the children, it started to evolve to photographing other families, and then I was photographing weddings. And then I hit a point where I was so frustrated with the lack of fellowship among like Catholic vendors and creatives, because our evangelical brothers and sisters are really good at that sort of fellowship, and there was nothing at the time for Catholics. And at the same time, as a response to the Supreme Court decision on the institution of marriage in our country, I wanted to do something to counteract that. And I really prayed about it and took it to adoration. And I had a friend who was coming out with a book for Catholics on how to plan your wedding. And it was the first thing like it. And so I pitched it to her. I'm like, what do you think that we provide this resource for Catholic brides and newlyweds, while at the same time like providing some sort of fellowship for vendors who work in the wedding industry, because it can be very cutthroat working in the wedding industry. Like, what do you think about this idea? And she said yes. God has really worked through our team, and which I'm really thankful for. And our mission is to showcase real couples who live their Catholic life faithfully, and to feature their wedding and their courtship and how God has worked through their life. And then we also push out a lot of articles about how to prepare for the sacrament of marriage and how to live out that call. Because there's plenty of couples that are getting married and they're not taking their faith seriously. And then sometimes their marriage is successful, and then a lot of times it's not. And so that's my hope with just our vocation and the mission of Spoken Bride, that we're able to spread the truth and the beauty of the sacrament of marriage.
What would you say to someone who might be living your same situation and can't get out of that darkness? They can't see the way out of the black tunnel where they are, but they want to. What would you say to them?
If I found somebody who was in despair and living in that darkness, I would just really encourage them to not lose hope, and to know that there is a God that loves them, and to hold on to that. So my hope is that Christians and people who follow Christ will be that witness of mercy to people who need it. To pray for them, because a lot of souls are being lost, and we really just need to win souls back for our Lord. And to reach out to that person, like, even if it's just, you crossed my mind, I just want to see how you're doing, or I was thinking about you and just want to let you know I was praying for you. Those little acts of kindness and those little acts of mercy can just bear so much fruit, and you just don't know the good that you're going to do in that person's life.
Jiza, thank you so much for joining us today. There's a black tunnel, and it's really dark, and it's really there. And the Lord, although we are in that black, dark tunnel, He is there. The thing is that we have to have faith in the Lord and Our Lady, who are going to get us out of there. So have faith, and let's pray for those who are suffering from depression. Thanks for joining us today.